He hadn't eaten all day. Grease stained his hands, and the last order had just rolled out. But when a soaked, desperate woman banged on the shop door after closing, the young mechanic tossed his coat over her shoulders and said, "Don't worry, I've got you." What he didn't know, the woman he helped that stormy night wasn't just lost. She was the new owner of the entire garage, and when she returned the next morning, everything changed. Let's begin. The rain came down, like knives, sharp, cold, relentless. Clayton Reese stood under the flickering light of the service bay, locking up for the night. The last customer had left 2 hours ago, and his stomach was screaming louder than the broken alternator he'd just finished patching up. He reached for the switch to cut the lights when, bang, bang, bang. The pounding came from the front door, not urgent like a robber, desperate, like someone clinging to their last straw. Clay hesitated. He was exhausted. The other guys had already left. But something in his gut, call it instinct or that lingering echo of his mama's voice, said open it. When he did, the sight hit him like a freight train. She stood there, drenched from head to toe, mascara trailing down her cheeks, her breath shaky. A soaked hoodie clung to her frame, and her trembling hands clutched a phone showing 3% battery. "Please, I don't know what else to do. My car died on the highway, and I walked for miles. No one would stop. You were the first lit place I saw." Clay blinked. "Come in," he said immediately, shrugging off his jacket and placing it around her shoulders. "You're freezing." I don't want to be a bother." He cracked a grin. "Ma'am, bother is a customer who yells at you for fixing exactly what they paid you for. You just need a hand." She smiled weakly, lips shivering. "Thank you. I'm Harper." "Clay, let me take a look at that car." She followed him back into the rain without another word. Her engine was flooded, a busted belt corroded, plugs and a battery nearly eaten alive. It would have taken anyone else 3 hours and a tow truck. Clay had it up and humming in 45 minutes. "You skipped dinner to help me," she said quietly as he packed up his tools, her voice almost swallowed by the storm. Clay glanced at her, brushing hair from his eyes. "You were alone, in the dark, in the rain. Didn't even cross my mind to turn you away." Harper's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than casual. "Why are you still working here?" she asked out of nowhere. "This late? This dedicated?" He shrugged. "Because this place is my family, even if the actual owners don't treat me like it. Besides, people depend on this shop, folks like you." He smiled. She didn't. She just nodded slowly, as if filing something important away. She was gone by morning. Clay assumed she was just another kind soul passing through. But by 9 a.m., every mechanic in the garage was gathered around the office window. Their eyes were wide, mouths shut. A black SUV had pulled up, and out stepped her, the woman from last night, in heels, tailored clothes, and no trace of mascara on her cheek. Harper West, the daughter of the man who just bought the entire shop chain. Only Clay didn't know that yet, not until she walked right past the confused receptionist, found Clay hunched over a busted radiator, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Good. Morning, Mr. Reese. I believe we need to discuss your promotion." For a second, everything froze. The wrenches clattered. Someone dropped a coffee. Clay stood up straight, his brows furrowed, grease streaking his temple. His first thought wasn't pride or curiosity. It was confusion. "Promotion?" he asked, blinking under the harsh overhead lights. "I think you've got the wrong—" "No, I don't," Harper said calmly, her voice laced with authority but not arrogance. "Clayton Reese, 29, night school in diesel mechanics, 5 years at this garage, covered 15 unpaid overtime shifts last month alone. I've done my homework." She turned and addressed the room. "I'm Harper West. As of this week, I'm the new majority shareholder in West Motor Group, this location included, and I'm starting with a leadership shake-up. The room fell into stunned silence. Mick, the current shop manager, a bitter old-timer with a mean streak, stepped forward laughing nervously. "Look, miss, I don't know what Clay's been telling you, but—" "Stop!" Harper cut in, her tone cold enough to silence a drill press. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder, slapping it onto the counter. "I've reviewed every disciplinary file, every complaint, every payroll discrepancy in this shop. You, Mick, logged more sick days in 3 months than Clay did in 5 years. And despite that, you docked his pay for slowness. You harassed Junior. Tex ignored safety violations and cost the company thousands in customer refunds." Clay's jaw tightened, stunned. "You're fired," Harper said bluntly. "Effective immediately, security will escort you out." Mick sputtered, looking at the others for support, but all eyes had shifted to Clay, who was frozen in place. Harper turned to him and softened. "Clay, I want you to be the new operations lead, not just here, eventually across 3 regional garages, but we'll start here. Full benefits, bonus structure, no more skipped dinners." Clay's hands trembled. "Slightly. Why me?" "Because when I was a stranger at your door, tired and soaking wet, you helped me like I was family," she replied. "And family should lead this place, not bullies." The men and women in the shop looked at each other, slowly nodding. They'd seen Clay give rides home to co-workers after shifts, stay late fixing mistakes others made, and never once ask for praise. But now he was getting it. That night, Clay stood on the rooftop of his rundown apartment complex, gazing up at the stars. His phone buzzed, a message from Harper. "Congrats, boss. Let's build something good, one honest mile at a time." Clay smiled, heart heavier than ever, but in the best way, because sometimes kindness really did come full circle, but not everyone was happy. In the shadows of a corner bar that same night, Mick downed a whiskey and snarled, "She just humiliated me over him. She's going to regret that." He had friends in corporate, friends who didn't like change, and as the weeks rolled on, Clay would realize his promotion wasn't just a reward, it was a target on his back. Clay didn't sleep that night, not out of anxiety, at least not at first. The rooftop wind still carried the city's fumes, and the buzz of what just happened at the garage hadn't worn off. For a guy who used to fix busted carburetors while praying he could afford rent that week, getting promoted to operations lead felt like being launched into orbit. But beneath the high, a subtle weight pressed down because he knew what came next. Scrutiny, expectations, and resentment. Especially from people like Mick, who'd spent years acting like the garage was his personal kingdom. And Clay, he'd just taken the throne. The next morning, Clay arrived at the garage early, only to find a dozen employees already gathered, whispering by the time clock. Some looked relieved, some looked cautious. Jenny, the quiet receptionist who'd once thanked Clay for walking her to her car during a blackout, smiled warmly. "Everyone's talking, Clay. You really shook things up." He gave her a half smile. "Hope I didn't break anything important." But not everyone was so cheerful. Duke, a senior mechanic with too much pride and not enough performance, barely made eye contact as Clay passed. "Guess kissing up to the boss works now," he muttered. Clay paused, locking eyes with him. "I didn't kiss up to anyone. I just did the job. You should try it." Duke scoffed, but said nothing else. Inside the office, Harper was already waiting, cross-legged in a chair, tablet in hand, blazer over a faded tee. The blend of corporate Polish and real-world grit fit her better than any title. "I thought I'd be the first one in," Clay said. Harper looked up, a sly grin playing at the corner of her lips. "Early bird gets the quarterly report." Clay groaned. "You're really leaning into this whole boss thing?" "I am the boss," she said, but the edge in her voice softened. "But I'm not here to make your life harder, Clay. In fact, I've got something for you." She reached behind her and slid a small envelope across the desk. Inside was a modest bonus check and a key. "That's not for the garage." She explained. "That's the key to the old supply room. I've converted it into your office. You've earned it," Clay blinked. "I've never had an office." "Well, now you do. Go right on the walls or hang up posters of spark plugs, whatever. Makes you feel like a leader." He laughed, but a lump formed in his throat. Not because of the gift itself, but because someone finally saw him. But the peace didn't last long. Later that afternoon, Harper sat in her car on the phone, her jaw tense. "I'm not backing down," she said into the receiver. "I own majority shares now. This is my call." On the other end was Grant Ellison, Executive VP of West Motor Group and Mick's longtime drinking buddy. "You think just because you inherited your father's shares, you get to dismantle his systems overnight? That garage was profitable because of the chain of command." "No," Harper snapped. "It was profitable despite the chain of command, because of people like Clay who kept it together. You're young, idealistic, but this won't end. Well, for you or your new friend." She hung up, fists clenched. Clay didn't know it yet, but corporate wasn't going to let this promotion experiment slide without a fight. And Mick, he'd been busy, feeding lies, calling in favors, spreading poison. By the end of the week, a surprise audit team arrived at the garage. 3 stiff suits with clipboards, measuring everything from repair times to parts inventory. And when they pulled Clay aside, one of them, Ms. Silverman, barely looked up from her notes. "Clayton Reese, right? There's a discrepancy here. 5 alternators signed out under your code. No record of installation. That's internal theft." Clay's stomach dropped. "What? No, that's not right. I haven't—" "You'll have a chance to explain in the report," she interrupted coldly. "Until then you're suspended. Across the shop." Whispers turned to stares. "And Harper—" She watched it all from her office window, her hands trembling in anger. Someone was setting him up, and she was going to find out who, because Clay had fixed her engine when no one else would. Now it was her turn to fix what was broken for him. Clay sat on the porch steps of his cramped apartment, knuckles raw from the cinder-block wall he'd punched an hour earlier. Suspended. Not fired yet. But it felt worse somehow. He'd clawed his way up from oil-stained overalls and graveyard shifts just to be blindsided by a lie, a deliberate, nasty lie, one he couldn't disprove because the system that accused him had already made up its mind. His phone buzzed for the 10th time. He didn't answer. Harper. Again. He couldn't face her, not until he figured out how someone got into his inventory code. And why? But Harper wasn't sitting still. At the garage, Harper paced behind her office desk like a storm building. She didn't slam drawers or shout. She was quieter when angry and more dangerous. She'd seen enough boardroom sabotage to smell corporate rot, and this stank of it. She replayed the conversation with Grant Ellison in her head. This won't end well. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise, and she was done letting them make the rules. Jenny, the receptionist, tapped gently at the door. "I know I shouldn't get involved, but I think you should talk to Paul." "Paul? The parts tech?" Jenny nodded. "He mentioned something strange last week. Said Duke and Mick were hanging around the supply room late when you and Clay weren't here." Paul was nervous. He always was. A mild, red-headed guy who kept his head down and label gun loaded, but Harper didn't. "Push!" She just asked, "Did anything go missing under Clay's name?" Paul hesitated. "Look, I thought it was just a mistake. But yeah, the system flagged 5 alternators, all logged under Clay's login code. And you didn't say anything." "I didn't want to cause trouble, but I remember Duke hanging near the terminal that night. Said he was helping out. I just figured." Harper didn't wait for the rest. She bolted to the back room and pulled the security footage logs. Most of it had been wiped, overwritten. But Paul, bless his forgetful soul, had saved a clip to show. His buddy, a funny fall Duke, took the same night, in the background of that clip. Duke, typing into the parts inventory system, on Clay's terminal. The next day, Harper stormed into corporate HQ, her heels loud on the marble floors, armed with footage and fury. "I know you're trying to railroad Clay," she told Grant Ellison across the sleek boardroom table. "I have proof, and if you don't reinstate him immediately, I will leak this to the media and file a corporate misconduct complaint so thick it'll bury this company's stock." Grant stared at her with disdain. "You wouldn't." She leaned in, voice calm but lethal. "Try me. I've already drafted the press release. I might be young, but I'm not naive, and I protect my own." By noon, Clay's suspension was lifted. By 3 p.m., Duke was fired. By 5 p.m., Harper was standing at Clay's door, holding a bag of burgers and a USB drive. "I told you," she said. Gently, "no more skip dinners." Clay didn't say anything for a moment. Just looked at her like she wasn't real. "I thought they were going to bury me," he whispered. "They tried," she said. "But you don't bury a man like you, Clay. You build around him." He let out a shaky breath and nodded. But as they sat together that evening, neither of them noticed the message flashing on Harper's phone, one she hadn't read yet. From Dad. Subject: urgent. West Motorboard. Votes incoming. "They're coming for both of you. Be ready." The next morning, the clouds over the city weren't just in the sky. They hung over West Motor Group like a silent threat. Harper stared at her father's message again. She hadn't seen him in 3 years, not since he stepped down and left. His empire to the sharks in suits and whispered deals. She didn't cry when he retired. She cried when he stopped caring. But now, he was warning her. The board was making a move. They wanted her gone, and if they couldn't touch her legally, they'd go after her authority. The garage. And Clay. She refused to let that happen. At the garage, Clay had returned to work. But things weren't the same. He smiled when he could, nodded when he had to, but he felt eyes on him. The kind of eyes that didn't blink, didn't forget. And Duke might have been fired, but he wasn't done. Rumors had already started spreading that Clay was a charity case, that he'd slept his way to the top, that Harper had fallen for him. He wanted to shout, to punch walls. But instead, Clay picked up a wrench and worked harder, because he knew something Mick never did. Loyalty doesn't need to shout. It shows up. That evening, Harper called a garage-wide meeting. Mechanics, techs, receptionists, everyone stood. In the center bay, as she climbed a step stool with her tablet in hand. "I want to say something before the storm hits," she began. "Because yes, a storm is coming." Murmurs rose. "The board thinks this garage is weak because it's honest. They think you're replaceable because you're not ruthless. They think Clay is disposable because he's not one of them." She paused. "But we're not disposable. We're the reason this company even has wheels to stand on. So if they want a fight," her eyes burned as she looked toward Clay, "we give them one, but we do it our way, with work, with loyalty, with truth." That weekend, Harper made her move, with the help of a sympathetic old board member and one quietly resentful VP. They exposed years of embezzlement from the previous managers, tied directly to those now gunning for her. And Clay, he did something even more powerful. He gave an anonymous interview to a local business podcast, speaking about employee abuse, toxic shop cultures, and the value of blue-collar leadership. His voice cracked, but his words soared. The episode went viral. By Monday, the boardroom was silent, and then broken by a slow, deliberate clap. Harper's father walked in, old, tired, but proud. He spoke 3 words to the board: "She stays, he leads." A month later, Clay walked into the garage with a new nameplate over the main office. Clayton Reese, director of regional ops' crew, stood and clapped, not because they were told to, but because they meant it. He looked over at Harper, standing near the coffee machine, pretending to scroll her phone. He walked over and whispered, "You still keep burgers in your glove compartment?" She smiled, not looking up. "Only on nights I think we'll save the world." And Clay, Grease. on his sleeve and hope in his chest, realized something. He didn't just fix engines anymore. He rebuilt lives.